Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast. I've got an old digital friend of mine. First time we've ever actually talked in person, Clay Martin. And Clay Martin is the author of these two books right here that we're going to link to in the show notes, Concrete Jungle and Prairie Fire. And Clay is not scared to turn off the part of his audience that he does not want looking at his books as he's in like all full redneck glory here in the back of Prairie Fire with his Gaston flag shirt on. That looks like a short barrel rifle. No, that's an AR pistol. We'll talk about the differences. And he's in there in his coveralls. I love this, by the way. Clay started his military service in the Marines, became a sniper, ended up moving over as, you know, some of those Marines do when they want to be in a more high-speed unit. They move over to the Green Berets on the Army side, did some crazy tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, now runs a basically self-defense and consulting business where Clay thinks we might be headed for some sustained low-level, what he would probably call Civil War II type conflict here in the United States. I'm interested in digging into his politics, into his theories on tactics and self-defense, and also a little bit about his military career. He comes to us from Oklahoma. I have no idea what your family looks like, wife, kids, dogs, all of the above. So, Clay, what did I miss in the 60-second Reader's Digest intro?
So, a wolf dog and a fat German shepherd. So I got those. And two kids, two smaller kids at least, wife and three grown kids because I'm smart. And that's how you do. You do a 20-year gap.
Yes, I also have a 20-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So we're on the same train, my friend. And for the record, what the fuck is a wolf dog?
They're a hybrid. They were very common in Montana and Idaho. You know, your German shepherd would slip out and, under the stars with the wolf, and next thing you know, you've actually got like a no-shit hybrid, and so I've got one of those.
So are you comfortable with the wolf dog around the little kids, or does he just patrol the perimeter?
It's ridiculous. Like, he's the nicest dog I've ever had for, like, he'll let me pull on his tail and pull on his ears and shit. He doesn't care.
Amazing.
He's also strangely bulletproof. Like, loud noises, the kids will kick over like a bar stool, so he doesn't care. He's just like, whatever.
Amazing, man. So tell us, first of all, we'll get to the books and kind of what you do now in your post-military career, but tell folks, like, when it comes to self-defense, firearms, tactics, strategies, building a community, kind of planning for the craziness that some of us think might exist in America in the not-too-distant future. First, tell us why people should listen to you. Tell us about your military service and kind of why you should even be an expert on this topic.
Well, it's funny that comes up. That's actually come up a number of times when I first retired too. One of the most noteworthy, I got hired to go teach a SWAT team to coach them to the SWAT Olympics. And I was like 5 minutes out of teaching the door kicking school for Green Berets, Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat. And so these guys had never met me before, and their chief hired me or whatever. And the first question come through the door of like this 22-year-old, 23-year-old cop with like 9 whole seconds of experience was, who the fuck are you to teach us? It's like, well, thank you for asking. This is who the fuck I am. So, yeah, man, basically with the military stuff, like, it sounds like borderline unbelievable to me sometimes, too. I did a bunch of crazy shit, a lot of it. Most importantly for the books, I was a Green Beret, and our specialty is actually making another army out of, whatever we could find, usually illiterate peasants with a suitcase full of money. That gives us a very different take on how things are. We're used to doing it with no budget in the middle of the jungle or the desert or whatever with absolutely jack shit for equipment. And then also relevant to that, I taught high-level special operations guys how to survive in urban environments. I can certainly teach you.
So I think, people think of special forces and they think of the, glamorized military movies, Navy SEALs, assault, it's always assault on action. It's always the assault, right? It's never the boring shit, which is what the Green Berets do, where you sit in the jungles of Panama or Nicaragua and you basically teach the insurgents how to overthrow their communist government. So can you explain a little bit what the actual mission of the Green Berets, which is, there's in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, Green Berets are kind of the behind the scenes force. And if we're talking about the Army, the door kickers, maybe that's Delta Force, even though supposedly they don't exist. Maybe that's the Navy SEALs, although apparently they don't exist either. So like, can you talk about, it's amazing how Hollywood knows about all these people that don't exist. Can you talk a little bit about why Green Berets are special and why they're unique?
Sure. So, I mean, that actually is like right there in the mission set. We can have some high speed acronym bullshit, which is like foreign internal defense. All right, basically, or unconventional warfare. Basically, what all that crap means, that's fancy sounding words that aren't offensive to people. That mean we can do one of two things. We can either start an insurgency, or we can stop an insurgency, and that basically depends on which side that Uncle Sugar wants us to be on. So that is exactly it, and it is some. It sounds really bad on paper. It sounds like it's a terrible recruiting angle, actually. So he's like, so check it out. What you're going to do is you're going to spend an ass load of time taking these probably idiots, can't read, whatever. We're going to pick the guys that, I don't know, they're probably losing at this point. We're going to give you a satchel of money, and you're going to go down, and you're going to take as long as it takes to make them competent enough to kick the shit out of their own army. Like, that sounds like it sucks. Well, it does. But
right.
It is actually, it's actually awful. But it does give you, like I said, a very different, very valuable skill set. And there's a reason that we exist and why they pay us to do that. 'Cause you can do it very quietly. Like I said, it's only like 12 dudes and money, which is expensive. It's printed. We'll make some more. Doesn't give a shit about that.
Right. Who cares?
You're right. Yeah, we'll get some more. But you send 12 guys out to do something like this in a weird place. Well, if 12 Americans get killed, like, that's really not that big of a deal. Like, it's not going to be on CNN for like more than a day.
Right.
It's not like we're talking about losing thousands and thousands. So it really is this kind of like weird, subversive, very kind of deniable way of doing business. And like I said, it's exactly the same way on the other side. Uncle Sugar finds some usually third world government, and he likes them. But the commies, for instance, or the Iranians or whoever's trying to do the same thing that we would do in the jungle, well, we go train their foreign government troops how to stop an insurgency, how to go in the jungle and kill those guys before they make a competent army. So, yeah, so it's a weird business for sure.
You know, it's funny, that movie 1917 came out, and I feel like World War I's kind of like the forgotten war, right? Because there's not a lot of video footage. It's kind of boring. It was trench warfare. Let's dig two big trenches and put tens of thousands of people facing each other, and then one day we'll blow the whistle and all try to kill each other.
Right.
It's crazy to me that kind of conventional warfare within 100 years has now become this non-conventional warfare where it's like, okay, we've gone from lining up thousands of people against each other, blow the whistle, let's go kill each other, to like, well, could we drop 12 guys into the jungle and recruit basically 100 fanatics who want to overthrow their government to start an insurrection? Like, I mean, that sounds like some shit straight out of the movies, but that's kind of where we've come in like under 100 years.
It very much is. That's basically the definition of like fourth and fifth generation warfare, especially. And there's other people that are very good at it too. The KGB was no slouch as the Soviet Empire. The Chinese don't suck at it for sure. The Quds Force out of Iran is actually, top notch. They're extremely good at it. But yeah, that's kind of where we've evolved to. It is very weird though that we can go from this, almost civilization ending levels of casualties to now. We've had, coups in the past recently, I'm talking like Ukraine in 2014, where the bloodshed was maybe like, 40, 50 people that got black bagged in the middle of the night, and there was no like crazy ninja assaults or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's a strange situation.
So, everybody probably has their favorite, Navy SEAL movie, Zero Dark 30 or something. Is there a movie that highlights either the Green Berets or kind of what we're talking about for unconventional warfare? I feel like it'd be a really boring movie for 90% of it. It's like, hey, we went into this tribe and took care of their animals and delivered a satchel of money and then tried to teach them English. But is there a movie out there that like captures the essence of what Green Berets do, or is it just not sexy enough in the moment to moment for Hollywood?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Probably like the original like 1950s or 60s, like Lawrence of Arabia is probably pretty good because that was essentially what he did too. So that one's pretty legit. Rambo 4 of all things. The first three being something completely different. The third one actually is still hilarious. The Afghans loved Rambo 3. Like,
I'm sure
we left. Yeah, and it was always funny to us, especially post September 11th, how it's dedicated to the brave Mujahideen. You're like, oh man, that's,
whoops,
that didn't age well. But the fourth one is actually pretty decent for like our guys. There's some Hollywoodized stuff in there to make it a more exciting movie, but that's pretty close. The original John Wayne Green Berets, that's ancient.
That is ancient.
Yeah.
I think our next job here, I think we're identifying our next job. You and I, because I'm from LA, so of course I have a couple movie scripts on my computer because you have to do that when you grow up in LA.
Required.
I think we have to write like a real life Green Beret movie where you guys just drop in and you're like cleaning the teeths of the horses and you're trying to teach the insurgents English and try to teach them what
holding hands with the elders and shit.
Yeah, exactly. L-shape ambushes. Try explaining that when you don't speak the language, right?
It's actually funny. A mutual friend of ours, I've taught both him and his kids now, like personally, and they commented on like the teaching piece. I'm like, we should try doing this in like Arabic, where you have like this much understanding, because we all have to speak a foreign language, but we don't speak it that well.
Right.
Try to teach like complex like sniper math to a dude that went to high school for like 1 year and a language that you don't speak. It complicates things.
Yeah. No, aperture. That's a very common word that you learn to translate immediately, right? Oh man, that's hilarious. Right. So do you want, what can you or can't you talk about in your military service? I'm sure some of it's classified. Like, did you do a lot of direct action stuff once, Afghanistan and Iraq kicked off, or did you do a bunch of secret squirrel shit that we can't talk about? Like, what can you kind of tell the people that they might, as a point of reference or a period of time, what can you share?
Well, yeah, that is kind of one of the weird things about being a lifer guy too. I actually did 15 years. I got medically retired in my 15th year. But staying in for so long, it starts to get weird when you think about like all the stuff that you have done. You're like, kind of think about it, you're like, yeah, I guess I actually am an expert at like all this crazy bullshit. So I walked kind of a weird path. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was a reconnaissance Marine. So I was in a direct action task force there. Then when I cross-decked and got into SF, the first thing I did is, now this one I do have to be careful about how I phrase it. I was on like the intelligence side. So I did a bunch of the weird undercover brother kind of stuff. Like I had a black beard and it was part of our job to tan every day. So I did a lot in that. And then I actually transferred again to a dedicated direct action unit. So I was a door kicker for the next 3-4 years. And then right before I retired, I ended up teaching both the door kickers and the snipers. So I kind of did most of it, if you will.
I've heard from several people that have lived and breathed in that community. Mike Glover, he owns Fieldcraft Survival. I went to one of his courses and we become acquaintances.
Mike was on the sister team to me.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Mike and some other people who I respect who are like real badasses. They're like, nothing is fucking harder than the Army sniper course. Like it's challenging. It's confusing. It's a little bit of luck. It's a lot of math. And for like myself, a bunch of morons who barely made it through high school, had I gone to the sniper class, I'd have to basically relearn math all over again just to try to make it through sniper school. Can you talk a little bit about what that training looks like? Because, everybody sees Hell Week for the Navy SEALs, and some people see maybe Robin Sage, which is the end of the Green Beret training. But I have heard from multiple people that like, bro, you don't even understand complication and frustration until you go through the Army sniper school.
Well, I'm going to say also it really depends on what you're good at. So there is that. And that's just like anything else. You're on a decathlon, like one guy's going to be good at running and one guy's going to be good at, throwing a javelin. So I definitely had a huge advantage when I went to SODIC, or the Special Forces Sniper School, which is our Magic Special One or whatever, because I'd already done that job for a long time as a Marine. And our course in the Marine Corps is, legitimately like brutal. In fact, it's kind of a different animal. Is that the Special Forces one is made for like senior experienced operators that have already proven themselves, all the badges and shit. So it's actually more of like a gentleman's course. The one in the Marine Corps is for young guys. So it is a lot more, and I went pre-war also. So it was a much more like, we're defending this badge, and if you really want it, like this is the price of freedom. To include, like silly shit, like to get to the range some Marines were broke. To get to the range every day, the first thing you do if you're going to shoot 1,000 yards, you run from the schoolhouse, and if you're in the part that has the handle the targets, you run another 1,000 yards down to the pits. Everybody else. So there were different animals in that regard. But kind of speaking for both of them, yeah, it is tough. Sniper school is also different than, like, say, soft selection or a reconnaissance school, because you can't make it just by being tough. Like, you have to both be tough and performance on demand at a very high level. Extremely long days. Like you said, having to learn the math. And then there's going to be something in there that you're not great at. Some guys could just shoot. Okay. And typically people think of also snipers as just shooters. Well, that'll only get you about 20% of the way. You can actually be a world-class sniper that can't shoot for shit because you can get close enough to make your shots effective.
Interesting.
Which is the second part. Yeah, it's a different take, but it really is true. As probably the biggest selector, and this was certainly the biggest selector at Marine Scout Sniper School, and it was a big one at Army Sniper School as well, is stalking. So
explain that.
This is one. Well, this sounds kind of like science fiction, but it's true. You ever seen the opening scene to Clear and Present Danger where
yes. Chavez is like, he's crawling up, and they're like, oh, he ate a hamburger here. I saw his wrapper. Right.
Well, we really do that. Also, how did Chavez end up playing like a sniper in like every movie for like the entire 90s? Like,
talk about
typecast.
The most typecast guy. He's like badass soldier number 3.
Right. He's Sniper Steve, but he never gets a leading role. Like, what the fuck, man? Anyway, we really do that. That is part of the game. And the theory behind it is there's certain rules for how we stock at the school because it's meant to be a test. So it's always, you have to shoot within 200 meters. So
that's real close.
Be that close. Real close. That's incredibly close to the rifle.
Like, I could shoot somebody from 200 meters, and I'm shitty with a rifle.
It's also very close to be able to see someone. They do that in school because the theory is if you can get within 200 meters of trained instructors, you can certainly get within 600 meters of a bad guy with like real security and shit like that, and I'd be able to get away. You always have to shoot twice. The second shot, they know where you're at. So you don't just go bam, bam. You shoot your first shot, and then they walk a walker like we're in that movie, to within 5 meters of you, and they look for you again, and then you have to shoot again and escape detection. So there's an art form to this, and especially those guys that have been on the other end at sniper school for a long time, like the instructors behind the binos, they can spot some things that are like superhuman, basically. I had them catch me one time when I was a younger guy in the Marine Corps because there was a single leaf on my ghillie suit that had turned backwards, and they told me that. Like after they busted me, they're like, "Hey, idiot, look at your left shoulder."
And there's just like an awkward leaf flying the wrong way.
Yeah,
man,
exactly. So you do have to learn how to do this like incredible, basically like magic trick of crawling around and camouflaging yourself. And that's a huge piece of sniper school. Is that? I think what were the other gates?
Which is weird, right? Because in modern urban warfare, I have to imagine most snipers don't have to be stealth. They're more in like an overwatch position, like in an elevated building. Like this idea of having to sneak through the foliage, that's probably kind of an antiquated sniper technique, I would guess, or am I full of shit?
Well, it probably was for us, like in the desert, but it's not in Ukraine right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of, you think about the way those guys are fighting. And then also, especially in like European cities, there's a lot of mixed terrain where there's like, city, wood, city, wood, city, wood.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense.
We're kind of seeing some evolutions with this war in Europe for reals, man. It's kind of taken us back in a lot of ways, like 20 years past our GY bullshit. And then depending on like the population of a city, like you're not going to like crawl around in Tokyo. That's ridiculous. But,
right.
A city that's already under like artillery barrages and people are not generally there, all the same stuff applies. And you may find yourself like crawling around the rubble looking for somebody. It's a weird skill set to have.
So what, let's say, for example, hypothetically, the 82nd Airborne was staging 4 miles from the border of Ukraine. Let's just say hypothetically.
That would be That's ridiculous. But
ridiculous.
Okay.
But let's say that was happening. Yeah. And let's say, hypothetically, there was some rumors that there were maybe some either advisors or entourage or security forces in Ukraine that were U.S., hypothetically. What forces would be in there right now supporting the Ukraine military? Because what I've been hearing from the, $80 million of supplies we've sent over there, some of the stuff is getting there. Oh, billions. Yeah, great. 80 billion. Sorry. 80 billion of supplies. Some of what I've heard is like it's getting there and it's like a fucking, surface to air missile and nobody in the unit knows how to use it. So what type of forces would be going into Ukraine right now, hypothetically, if we wanted to support them in their ground efforts against Russia to turn them back, which quite frankly, at this point, geopolitically, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And maybe you have an opinion on that, but what type of forces in the military would we lend to Ukraine if we wanted to help them win the war?
Oh, that would definitely be our guys. I mean, that's what we do. You throw a couple of ODAs in there that would.
What's ODA?
Missiles and stuff. Operational Detachment Alpha. That's the correct term for a special forces team. That's
12 men, right?
12 men. Yeah.
And why 12? I think I know the answer to this question, but can you tell the audience?
Yes. So there's four primary jobs, what we call MOSs on a team. There's your weapons guy. It's an 18 Bravo weapons sergeant. 18 Charlie does both explosives and digs wells, builds bridges, all that kind of shit for your villagers so that you can get them to be insurrectionists. 18 Deltas, which are medics. There are 18 Echoes, which are communications guys, the radio nerds. And then there's a little bit of command and control, which is a captain, a warrant, a master sergeant, and an intelligence sergeant. Well, they make it 12 men because all those jobs have a junior and a senior, which is like a Sith apprentice relationship.
Nice.
One guy's always the top.
You could be a Jedi. You don't have to be a Sith.
Right. Jedi apprentice. Either way. But the idea then is you can actually take that and split it down even further. If you need to expand the reach of that same team, you just split it exactly in half. So senior weapons guy, junior medic, senior engineer guy, junior, whatever, however you want to split it up. And then you actually have two ODAs. Now you're running a little bit lighter, but you can do all the same shit over here and over here at the same time.
Interesting. When I was at Fort Riley, Kansas, I got out before 9/11, before the shit hit the fan. And the only thing that was interesting that was going on was all the engineers had left to Bosnia to clear mines on the whole Princess Diana, clear the mines from Europe. And this is how boring pre-war. This is how boring Fort Riley, Kansas was pre-war. I volunteered to get embedded with an engineer unit to go clear landmines because that's how bored I was, and they wouldn't let me go because I wasn't an engineer. But they were like, "Hey, just in case we need a backup, we'll send you to sapper school." So I got to go to sapper school for a month and a half. It was awesome. And all we did, I'm like 20 years old. We're out there in the middle of Fort Leonard Wood, just blowing shit up every day.
Yeah.
And we had a little bit of privilege at the end of the day. We could go to, Burger King, whatever. This is right as the Timothy McVeigh case was going on. So somewhere out there's a, local Channel 7 news camera gets stuck in my face and they're like, "So, sir, what do you think about them teaching teenagers how to blow up bridges and destroy buildings?" And I'm like, "It's awesome, man. I learned how to blow up a bridge just today." So I can never run for office because that news clip will resurface and I'll look like a goddamn domestic terrorist. So, but Sapper School was awesome because it was physically challenging. We got to blow a bunch of stuff up and I was shocked how much explosive material, C4, it actually takes to bring down a telephone pole or a bridge or something like that. It's it's not like in the movies where they put one little charge on the door and the whole wall blows up. That would have been such a fun job to do that full time.
Oh man, dude, yeah, you're exactly right there with people not understanding how much it takes. Yeah, no, it gets ridiculous. I mean, you're talking backpacks full of shit to be able to do some of these things. That is hilarious, though. Everybody, I know every Charlie, and that's our explosives guys. Every one of them wanted to blow up a bridge. Everyone. That's like the Charlie wet dream. Well, I knew a Charlie that got to, and he won't tell you this. He'll just tell you blew up a bridge. But the reality is, it was the same size as a bridge that somebody could have with a koi pond. It
was like a footbridge.
It's like a 1-lane sort of light car bridge. It's 3 meters long, but he got to. I mean, props to him.
Yeah, the highlight of his military career, getting to blow up a bridge. What MOS were you, out of curiosity?
I was an Echo and then a Fox. So I was a radio nerd and then I was an intelligence nerd. So I
You had to do all the boring stuff, fill the radios and have all the
1.21 gigawatts. Yeah.
The idea that you were the nerd of your unit just makes me laugh. Knowing what I know about you, I'm like, this guy is definitely not the nerd. That's good stuff. So, okay, obviously you did some secret squirrel shit that you can't talk about when you're in the intelligence side. What about the direct action? If you can talk about it, like where were you? Were you in country? What kind of stuff were you guys assaulting, or what kind of mission set did you guys have?
Yeah, so let me be careful exactly how I phrase this one as well too. I was not in Delta Force. That's a different thing, but I was in Special Forces' own dedicated direct action unit. So we basically, when I got there, that was like getting to the big show. That was like winning the lottery ticket to, I don't know. It was like getting drafted to the NFL and you went to Tom Brady's team or something.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the shit you read about when you're a kid. Like, this is the Tom Clancy books. This is the thing that we dream about as teenage boys. Like, I'm going to go save the day and be a warrior.
Exactly. And then for me also having like paid my dues, like making these intelligence packets and doing all this like insanely dangerous shit for like no glory that you can't talk about anyway, but it also like it sucks, like it's hard work. Well, then I landed at this direct action company and it was basically like fucking Candyland. Like we just show up at the briefing room, they'd be like, okay, boys, here's the target packet for tonight. We're going to start with this asshole. We don't even really know who he is. There's Petra Papa Smurf. Go kill him. When you're done with him, we got this one over here. It's 4 blocks away. And then we got this one. It would be out just blowing charges, wrecking shit. And sometimes they'd call in the middle of that, like, hey, you know what? Chuckle fuck over here just popped on his cell phone. Why don't you go get him too? And it was like an all-night, all-you-could-blow doors buffet of just fucking pure shenanigans. And it was awesome. I mean, it was like maybe a time in history that we'll never relive. Is where I was at too. We actually still had indigenous forces. We had the Iraqi Counterterrorism Force, aka the Dirty Brigade, aka the Golden Brigade, and those dudes were animals. I mean, just savages that had been purposely built over a number of years at that point by dudes from the direct action companies. And man, there was nothing like it. It was an awesome time. It was probably the only time for me in like my history of warfare that it was like really like the movies. Like here you go. This is all we're doing all the time.
Yeah, so that Iraqi Special Forces Golden Brigade or whatever you called them, because of the clusterfuck of a pullout from Afghanistan, I think that has kind of tainted all local forces that the United States have trained over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But from what I've heard from people like you is like, hey, there was some hard charging, hardcore Iraqi soldiers who wanted to fight for their country, wanted to get, ISIS and the precursor to ISIS out of there, and really wanted to serve their country to rebuild into a democracy. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about those people? Because I feel like there's the Iraqi, normal forces or special forces or whatever, whoever they were, that they really just don't get their 15 minutes.
No, man, and dude, these guys were awesome too, man. I mean, they really were. They were world class. I would put them up against, probably not like the tier 1 European SOF, but definitely like the tier 2 and 3 European SOF, as well as ours in certain cases. That those Iraqis would kick the shit out of them. I mean, they were incredibly professional. They were fighters. They really wanted to be there. The worst part about the Iraqi counterterrorism forces is about 70% of them died in the fight against ISIS. Because we abandoned them as a nation. The United States just was like, hey, fuck it, you're on your own for Ramadi and those other terrible fights. And the nation of Iraq would not exist if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't gone out and fought like that and sacrificed themselves, particularly holders of key bridges, shit like that. So to my knowledge, fortunately, most of the guys that survived, which was not a lot, they did end up bringing them back over here. And this is actually a Green Beret specialty as well. The United States always abandons our allies, and we always end up making it right as we can for the guys that survived. I mean, they spent 20 years after Vietnam getting Montagnards out. That there's a couple of huge camps in the East Coast of Montagnards. Same thing with
what's a Montagnard? I'm not familiar with that term.
Montagnard is they were the tribesmen from the highlands of Vietnam that basically became like Special Forces' own army.
Nice.
So after the war, Uncle Sam abandoned them too. North and South Vietnam hated them. It was like it would be like the equivalent of like, let's say that a war broke out North and South us again, and Russia came over and trained all the native tribes to fight whichever side they didn't like. It was exactly like that. So Special Forces spent, like I said, like 20 years and like an untold personal fortune bringing those guys out. We got most of the Iraqi counterterrorism forces that we could. There's a lot of those guys, like, I mean, selling like cars in New Jersey and shit right now. You know, they couldn't stay over there after what they had done, and you know, they at least got to come to America when it's all over. So I hope that makes up for it. But yeah, it was a terrible. It was arguably the most successful story of the entire GWAT, and then we fucked it up at the end. Explain the GWAT and that time frame. Oh, yeah. So the global war on terror. So I'm talking about everything that happened from September 11th, 2001 until the Afghanistan well done withdrawal last August. Clearly. You know, it's funny. I can't really mention who it is because he's still active duty and he would not want me using his name or any references. But I have a friend that's in special forces and he's like, dude, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but he's at the officer level. He's like, I just don't get it. He's like, we have like standing op orders. We have the plan for when you're moving a place or when you're withdrawing from a place. You basically need 10 guys, a bunch of grenades, and a few plasma cutters, and you can turn billions of dollars into equipment into basically paperweights in about 2 days. He's like, the fact that we left all that stuff behind at Bagram's Air Force Base, he's like, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you can throw one grenade into a, basically a shipping container, and all of the night vision goggles are worthless. He's like, the fact that we left all this shit behind, it's a debacle where like, somebody should be going to jail, and he's like, it just doesn't. He can't square it in his mind. Oh, dude, I there were things that were happening during that withdrawal that a lot of people may miss, but like if you like knew what you were looking at, like you really, really got. And one of them, I've only seen the clip once because I think I saw it happening like relatively live, and then it got pulled. There was an entire CIA safe house left behind with the warehouse attachment of like next generation goodies, like the badass like shit I haven't even played with, night vision goggles, stacks of money, fake passport, the whole fucking nine. And you saw the Taliban dudes like rooting around and that, like throwing each other, you know, like, oh my god, yeah, it's a very difficult thing to square. Like, how did we? And China's got all that shit now. Anything we had that was classified or hard to build, they've got it. Yeah, they've got it. Russia's got another set. Everybody's happy. So crazy. So, you know, I'd love an opinion from somebody that actually served boots on the ground in Iraq, right? So it's like we go in, we overthrow Saddam. Okay. Obviously, there's, I think, some, what it would be, the Ba'ath loyalists. Like some people wanted to still fight back, saw America as the invaders. But for the most part, you know, whether you read Jocko's book on Fallujah or, you know, some of the crazy about it, for the most part, we had kicked the ass of most of the people that didn't want us there. And then something changes, and I don't know if it's political, religious, you know, other countries' exterior forces. Something happens where basically now they start flying the banner of ISIS and come back into Iraq. Can you give us an opinion on what went wrong between like, hey, we're kind of winning the war and we're getting a foothold and this country might have a chance at democracy, to like, oh shit, now we got to refight our way through all these cities because XYZ came back into play? Yeah, I have a theory, but a lot of people don't like it. But I'm going to put it out there anyway. That's why I'm having you on. This will be our last ever YouTube video. The NSA is going to pull us down. It'll be fine. I'm going to take a Hellfire missile. You're going to go to jail for tax. We're fucked. Yeah, we're screwed. Looking back on it, I can only come to the conclusion that we deliberately drug the war out because it was a huge money wash to turn our tax dollars into Halliburton's dollars, which then line the pockets of your congressman. There's no other way to explain it. I mean, it was a complete clusterfuck at levels that shouldn't be possible. And those are things that as a young man, like, you don't understand. You know, like as a 20-year-old fighting it, like, okay, whatever, we're doing this. Or, you know, 5 years later, like, oh, this is still, maybe it's just fucked up because it's how war is. No, it's not, man. Like, the biggest, you can trace back the beginnings of the debacle that was Iraq. Probably the worst thing I ever did for my own career was I read Cobra 2, which is a very well written book about the invasion of Iraq, written only about 2 years after it was done.
Cobra
and all the
2.
planning that went into that.
I'm gonna have to read that.
Oh, dude, it's great. Well, just read the first 5 or 6 chapters. But all these generals, we live in the internet age already. Then all these generals and Pentagon planners and shit, they all wanted to be like a famous fucking general when this is over. So they had like biographers and shit at the planning sessions for the invasion of Iraq. And the dude that wrote that one was a piece of that. So he got like an inside track, inside look. The second thing was I read the same like week, whatever the equivalent was for Afghanistan. It was Not a Good Day to Die or some bullshit like that. I think that was it. Anyway, so I read both those things, and the Cobra 2 one was especially bad because I fought in that invasion. So I know exactly what the fuck was going on there. And I was on a ship in the Marine Corps for 9 months leading up to that. So that was like life. And they had some absolutely asinine plans in there. One of which was they were going to invade, and you'll know what this is, and you can help me interpret to the audience. At one point, they actually planned and greenlit the idea of invading Iraq with a single MEU, which is basically like a battalion of Marines and like a battalion of artillery, and a single armored cavalry regiment. You know how small that is?
It's not enough.
They were going to take those to Kuwait, push them over the fucking wire, and then basically like hold while they brought all the rest of the forces from the United States. That's like 15,000 guys or something. It's like maybe 100 tanks. Like, it's tiny. That's a fucking insane plan. Like, that's in no way should that be taken seriously. But they thought about doing it.
For context, didn't the first Gulf War have like 7 U.S. brigades, thousands of tanks, and then like several other brigades from Australia, the UK, Germany, the whole 9 yards?
We may have actually been talking about divisions back then. That was before my time. We'd have to pull that number up, but it was a lot. I mean, it was a fucking ass load. Like a single. I'm gonna have to have Chris
look this up. How many U.S. tanks were driving across the desert from Kuwait to Iraq in the first Gulf War? You mentioned this contingent of 100 is just asinine. Yeah, it was probably divisions, right? It was like the big red one, thousands of tanks. Right. I mean, it's got to be crazy.
Yeah, fourth ID, like all the armored dudes. Yeah, every one of them. Yeah.
Oh my God, and that was their plan, huh?
That was a plan that was like actually approved, and thank God they didn't execute. But the other really telling thing.
What did it say, Chris?
It just says like its army was the 5th largest in the world, so I don't know what it's referring to, but it does say 5,500 main battle tanks.
5,500 tanks, yeah. Couple more than 100.
Right, that's a little different, right?
Yeah. That was the first Gulf War where we stopped before we got to the major cities because we didn't want to escalate the war. But just to effectively take over the desert fields where the oil was, 5,500 tanks.
Right.
And they thought they were going to do it with 100.
Right. Yeah.
Good job.
Start it intentionally with 100 and then rapidly bring enough follow-on forces. You can be talking about like World War II era fucking T-34s from the Soviet Union. If you had enough of them, you could stop an armored cavalry regiment.
Right.
So that's insane. That whole thing is like asinine. The second thing that they really say in that book, and I believe this to be true when it's over, everybody did all this invasion planning and all this shit and like all this stuff. There's a phase, the last phase of an invasion is called phase 5, and that's where you consolidate your gains, disarm the army, and like give them like real jobs. Like you were a colonel in the Iraqi army, now you're like the dog catcher. This kind of shit. It's an actual phase of military operations. They kicked that to like a lieutenant colonel like 2 weeks before the invasion. Like, oh, Jim, by the way, while you're getting coffee, we forgot to plan for phase 5. So you got it? Okay, cool, man. All right, make that happen. So that's insane by itself. Yeah, that's like some horrifying shit.
Yeah, and to clarify for the audience who doesn't know what we're talking about, they're basically looking at kicking off what ended up becoming a 2-decade war with no end goal. It's like
none.
That would be if you and I were like, okay, let's play a game. And but I'm not going to tell you how we win.
Right.
Like you go first, and you're like, well, what's the rules? I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell you the rules, and I'm not going to tell you how we get to the end. That's like the equivalent of what they were doing, that they threw it down to some 04, which is basically a junior officer to say, hey, when this is all said and done, the exit strategy, a total afterthought. We'll figure it out later.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
Oh, so that's awful. And then the third thing that comes out of that, you have to put these two pieces together yourself with some, detective skills. So in one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, I forget which one, he's got a chapter dedicated to this guy named General Van Ripper. General Van Ripper is arguably the most brilliant general of the last century. He's awesome. He was a Marine Corps guy. He fought in Vietnam as like a young platoon commander, rose up through the ranks, and they got rid of him because he's so effective, which is usually what happens if you have a general that's actually effective. So they got rid of him in the 90s. But he is like the dude. He's the most, like I said, arguably the most brilliant general of the last century. So in Gladwell's book, it's a chapter about General Van Ripper. So he talks about how they brought him in to run this exercise, to be the bad guy for this major exercise where they were really shooting cruise missiles and shit, like a $100 million government exercise. They had him play the part of the Op 4 commander, and basically he kicked the shit out of like this entire like task force. He sank like 3 Navy ships with like some bullshit like 1960s era missiles. Had all these ways around like communication structure, and then basically like turned his fictional force into like little guerrillas that just made mayhem for like the next 2 decades. Well, he says the name of the exercise in Gladwell's book. When you open Cobra 2 and it talks about the brilliant exercise, and what they did at the end of that exercise was they reset everything. They told him to go sit in the closet, and they ran it with somebody else they could win. When you open Cobra 2, they talk about the same exercise. It's the exact same name. They're like, this is, by God, how we knew we could take over Iraq and win. And like,
but the first time they ran the exercise, the Op 4, meaning the opposing force general, sunk all their battleships and drug them into a 20-year winless war.
Yes, just kicked their ass. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, it's painful to think about. It's painful to think about.
When people talk about the military-industrial complex or they talk about any conspiracy theory, my mind usually goes, okay, in the world of like James Bond style bad guy, nefarious intentions, selling out your country for money, or just pure ignorance, I almost always side on the side of ignorance because people are fucking stupid. Like, I'm stupid, you're stupid, people are so stupid. Like, I can't figure out, how to back out of my driveway because it's a pretty steep driveway without my emergency brake on my truck going on. And I've done this 10 times and scared the shit out of myself where I'm like, oh, God, did I just run over my kid or is that the emergency brake again? So I can't figure out the ramifications of backing out of my driveway. I can't imagine being in a position of military power or political power and trying to think of the ramifications of invading a country. So I like to give the people the benefit of the doubt that they're ignorant and not evil. Did you see instances where people were just ignorant or just evil, or is it a little bit of both? Or do you think something happens where that switch gets flipped?
We're talking Occam's razor then too. Yeah, never attribute to malice what's equally explained by stupidity. Totally.
There you
go. Man, I think for the most part, on like the sides that I would have seen, like that, the military generals and shit like that, I think it was mostly ignorance. I think we promoted basically goobers and yes men along the way. I mean, one of the other cringiest things that I've ever heard in my fucking life, I forget it was the general that invaded Iraq or Afghanistan. It was one of the two, like the 4-star, like the big boy. He made his staff watch Gladiator like 5 times a week, and he ended all of his like meetings with strength and honor. That was his thing. Like, fucking Russell Crowe, man. Like, this is the best a U.S. general can get as a Russell Crowe movie. Like, this is it. This is not like I studied the classics. This is not like, this is some stuff from the Battle of Hastings, no, man, it's Russell Crowe. That says a lot about the guys at the top. People like to assume that our generals are like these brilliant dudes. No.
I mean, they're politicians, right? You get above the major or the colonel level. Like, I think in special forces, once you become a colonel, you're no longer out in the field. You're doing planning. Right. Like, to go from colonel to 4-star general, it's effectively politics, right?
Right, exactly, 100%. You'll occasionally have a guy slip in there that actually is brilliant, but it's getting rarer and rarer. Usually it's just some fucking yes man. But yeah, so I think for the most part on that side, it was just ignorance. But you also, I mean, you see the sellout, man. You see it happen all the time. Every one of these generals that retires within a year, he's got, a 7- to 8-figure job at, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, any of these things. And they're assured that job usually for the first 3 years only because of their access.
Right.
They still know. They still play golf with, Steve, who's the 3-star that became the 4-star, all this other shit. And we even saw that with a guy who was like a hero to the grunts of the world, General Mattis. he was like our dude, and look at what happened. He immediately sold out and went back to the board at Rolls-Royce. I think that's where he was at. And he was like, well, fuck it, man. I'm just going to make a paycheck. So I think that's where you start to see the evil part come into play. I mean, those dudes are all involved in the military industrial complex, and it doesn't take much to see it, man. Just a 5-minute Google search to tell you where that turns up.
Yeah. Unlike most people that have never actually looked at the U.S. budget, people are like, oh, the military is the biggest portion of spending. It's like, no, it's not. It's the biggest part of discretionary spending, but about 55% of the budget is already spoken for with Social Security and entitlement spending and stuff. That being said, I try to balance these two thoughts where I'm like, hey, even as a libertarian, I believe in a strong federal military to be a deterrent, to protect our borders, although people don't seem to care about that anymore. Sometimes we will probably have to do direct action in other countries. I'm trying to balance that thought with, yes, we need a strong military. And how in the fuck is the budget for the military in 2022 like 10% larger than it was when we were actively fighting 2 wars? It just doesn't make a lick of sense. So it's like, I'm kind of sympathetic to my Republican friends who say we need a strong military. And I'm kind of sympathetic to my more liberal progressive friends that are like, maybe we could peel off a couple billion and have better schools. I don't know. It's tough. Like having served in that and now doing, personal consulting and stuff on the defense side, what's your opinion on the military industrial complex? And then I want to get to your books.
Oh my God, dude. The military industrial complex is so difficult to start peeling back the layers on, because like I could take a neutral approach and see why like certain rules are certain rules. There's certain like contracting rules, for instance, about like where you can buy parts from and how contracts get bid. Well, that was done basically as a defense against going all the way back to like especially the Indian agencies in the 1880s, 1890s, where that was just like a scumbag's fucking job. Like you bought a dude in Washington, and the return on investment for your bribe was like 100%. They gave you this pile of money, and then you just totally fuck the Indians. Like, you're supposed to get them wool blankets, we'll get them cotton blankets. You get them, So over the years, there was all this stuff that was built into to stop that. Well, the grift kind of just evolved right past it and continues. So now it's this big bureaucratic just clusterfuck. I can put it in a very personal example that's very small and a lot easier to understand for a lot of people like in the audience. So back when the war in Afghanistan and Iraq was going on, one of the things that we had to do, because we didn't have enough space for it on military bases, was we had to contract a lot of training, especially like cultural engagement, stuff like that. One of the things I ended up doing after I retired, I would drive literally 15 passenger vans of Afghans up to New Jersey to live in a fake Afghan village for the weekend. And, pretend to be GAN so that these soldiers could come by, not even to fight, to, have tea with the elders or whatever kind of bullshit that we needed right then to make this, kid from Arkansas understand how to deal with an Afghani, farmer. So anyway, part of the deal with this was all of these, or a certain amount of these contracts had to be bid to what they called basically small businesses is the equivalent. They had to be bid to companies that made less than $2 million a year and veterans for all this other bullshit. Well, that was true for about a month. Immediately after that, all these big companies like Raytheon, Boeing, all this other shit were like, well, we don't want that money going away. So what we're going to do is we're going to team with, and it's not an official handshake thing, but it's more of like we'll help you write the contracts and get the thing. We're going to take 30% off the top, and then your small business can have the thing. And that's exactly how it went. And basically, after about a month, maybe 2 months, you couldn't win without being on Boeing or Raytheon's team, who was taking a huge, huge percentage of that cash right off the top.
Right.
That's where the grift and the spending just really just spirals the fuck out of control on the whole MIC. So yeah, it's a cluster, man. It's very hard to understand it.
It's funny because what you're describing in the military filters down to what I think is any bureaucratic organization. I have a friend, Yeah, he's retired now. He wouldn't care if I tell this story. He was like a supervising sergeant for LA County sheriffs, you know, and they run the jails. And he's a pretty lean dude. At one point, he was running like a bay, you know, so it's like, think of like 2 times the size of a gymnasium. They're housing 500 prisoners in there that are a little bit less violent. And I remember, like, you know, they'd have to do their requisition at the end of the year where they're like, hey, you got to put in your supply order and how much body armor you need and whatnot. And, you know, their floor was allocated $375,000 in supplies. He'd come back and he'd be like, well, we need about $325,000 of supplies. And they'd send it back and they'd be like, no, you need $375,000 worth of supplies. And he'd send it back and he'd be like, no, I need $325,000 supplies. And finally he gets a call from, you know, somebody way up the food chain. He's like, look, if you don't utilize the whole $375,000, we can't ask for our 10% budget increase next year. And if we can't get a 10% budget increase next year, you're never going to go from sergeant to captain. So he retired at 22 years as a sergeant because he refused to fake the funk. But everybody else who wanted to fall in line, you know, they just keep bloating the budget and bloating the budget and bloating the budget. And then you wake up one day and you're like, wait, why the fuck does it cost $1 million a prisoner to house somebody in LA County? It's just nuts.
Fucking insane.
It's just nuts. So yeah, that's how that works in the smaller scale. So I want to move to your books, man. Like, first of all, what, and I've got some real strong opinions on this, so maybe I'll chime in. What makes you think, why do you believe that the average citizen needs to be way more prepared than they currently are?
Oh, man, because we saw it. Because we fucking saw it. The concrete jungle especially, okay, this is kind of like the gift of foresight of you know, I don't know, having lived in shitty places my whole life, you know, and watched these things kind of catch fire sometimes. You know, I started seeing indicators that we were headed for some like really kind of like rough crime stuff about, you know, like 2018, 2019. So that's when I started writing Concrete Jungle, and it got rejected by every major publishing house in the world, whatever kind of shit. And I kind of actually forgot about it until I woke up and like the George Floyd riots were going on, or whatever we want to call those, the BLM Summer of Love for 2020.
The mostly peaceful riots where they did $1 billion were mostly peaceful protests. Where, in fairness, let me just give the disclaimer: there was millions of people that were protesting peacefully during the day. And the couple 100,000, couple tens of thousands that turned into shitheads at the end of the evening and decided to burn it all down, you know, they killed a couple hundred people and they did $1 billion worth of property damage. So mostly peaceful turned into real shitty real fast.
Real fast, right. Well, man, people were caught off guard by that shit. Like your average American citizen was like really stunned. I mean, they were fucking like, people were terrified in their houses. And, you know, just prior to that, COVID having like basically run us out of guns and ammo because, you know, everybody bought everything up. I mean, people were like really scared shitless there. And that wasn't that long ago. And we didn't actually solve the problem. Like that could happen again this summer. That could happen pretty much as soon as they flip the switch and decide to. So that was like indicator number one that like the average American needs to be a hell of a lot more prepared than they already were. COVID actually should have been the lockdowns, all that crazy shit. That should have been indicator number two. Is that, I mean, that could have been a whole lot worse. I mean, if that had actually been like a very lethal disease that it had killed, you know, I don't know, 15, 20% of the population, we would be in a much different situation already. And then, man, the hits basically just keep on coming. Have kept on coming ever since. I was just reading, actually before we came in the podcast, one of the biggest electricity suppliers in the Northeast, so up in like Connecticut, Vermont, has just said that they don't have enough natural gas to run through the winter. Like, that's where we're at. You know, Texas's power grid, I think one of the things that used to be the most powerful grid in the world, like it got its ass kicked by like a relatively simple storm 2 years ago. And even this summer in Dallas and in Austin, both, there was concerns. There was like blackout warnings, just like, you know, California's had for years now, of like, hey, you know, crank your AC up to like 78, because if everybody doesn't do that, like, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose the grid. So we're teetering right on the cusp of all these, like, you know, they're not like Armageddon, like, you know, a meteor strike the earth. We're teetering right on the edge of all these little disasters that are entirely possible. So, yeah, man, people, I think, really need to get it together.
You know, I was talking to somebody who would probably think that I'm a bit of an alarmist or a conspiracy theory, or he would laugh at me for reading your book, Concrete Jungle.
Yeah.
And I go, look, man, remember how frustrated and people were over toilet paper? I don't know why that became the product du jour of like, there's a run on toilet paper. He's like, well, yeah, you know, that was kind of crazy. And I'm like, okay, now do food. Like, just imagine COVID kills 1% or 10% of the population instead of 0.01%. And do you think a single fucking person shows up to stock the shelves at Albertsons? Do you think if there's a 1 in 10 chance of dying from COVID, any trucker is like, yeah, let me go unload a bunch of, food in front of a bunch of strangers? Like, no. What happened with toilet paper? Now, if all of a sudden you do milk, cheese, baby formula, you're about. I read an article the other day from who was it from? Warrior Poet Society. I like some of their online content.
Yeah, no, he's legit. I like that dude.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. They sent out a blog the other day of like society is basically about 9 meals away from falling apart. You know, you're a parent. I'm a parent. If something happens where I couldn't feed my kids for 3 days, how desperate and, homicidal or suicidal do I get if I'm looking at my starving children? You know, we're only 9 meals away from like society going pretty crazy.
You're exactly right, man. I mean, that's always the point I bring up to people too, is like, if your children were actually like starving to death, like what would you do to prevent that? Because I would do some terrible fucking savage shit. I would eat the fucking neighbors. I'll be straight about that. Like that's what I would do. And most people are actually hardwired that way, whether they think it or not. So, yeah, you take food out of the equation, people will turn, absolutely feral.
You know, I think it was, I can't remember if it was in your book or in one of the podcasts I was talking to you where you were like, hey, it's an interesting thing when the supply chain breaks down. It breaks down for everybody, including drug addicts. You know, I live in Vegas right now. We have a house in LA, so I'm in LA a lot. There's a lot of drug addicts in LA and Vegas. Like that's just whether it's fentanyl or meth or whatnot. If all of a sudden you break down the supply chain of drug addicts, they get real violent, real fast, going door to door looking for prescription drugs or whatever the case may be. Like people just don't think about this because we live in the freest, safest country that's ever existed in human history. Yeah, we got some problems, but like we've all been lulled into this kind of false sense of security. So what if you had to take a gamble? What do you think goes first? Do you think it's fuel? Do you think it's food? Do you think it's electricity? What do you think regionally? We're here in Nevada, or you're out there in Oklahoma. Yeah. What do you think breaks down first on a regional level that you're like, oh shit, yeah, my books ended up being a little you're a little bit of a prophet there.
Backing that up one step too, think about not just the fentanyl and the cocaine. Think about cigarettes and alcohol.
Oh,
man, you want to see some angry people? Like, take all the smokes out of whatever fucking county. And how far is Las Vegas from a tobacco field? About 900 miles.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a bad day out. But yeah, dude, I think you're exactly right. I think regionally it becomes a different thing, and it's obviously a little bit hard to predict exactly what goes where. The biggest problem you guys have in the West is water. There's some pretty good studies going around out there too about how the Western United States can support about 1/10 of its actual population if we don't have stuff like sufficient fuels to run electricity, to do air conditioning, refrigeration, move all this shit around, as well as just the problems with like Lake Mead and what's the one up the other reservoir right above that. You guys are on the cusp with some very bad problems right there. As far as everybody else, that's a tough one. I really thought fuels this summer, when diesel got over $5 a gallon, I was very, very worried, because that impacts everything else too. That impacts your delivery cost, your drivers, all that shit.
Yeah.
So that I feel like I'm actually kind of amazed that hasn't like spiraled us into depression already. The East Coast now is down to a 20-day supply of diesel, which is a huge problem for them. If the diesel ever stops, like we're totally screwed. We're hosed completely.
Yeah. People don't understand. If you shut down basically 2 ports in Southern California, Long Beach and San Pedro or whatever, you're like 80% of the goods that come into the Southwest region of America come from semi-trucks, which come from boats. All that stuff run from diesel. Like, look, I'm all about a green future. I want the environment to be here for my kids, and we really need diesel fuel.
Right. Well, dude, I didn't realize how much farmers are dependent on it. It's one of those things like you think about and you don't really know. I started the part of the reason I'm back in Oklahoma. This is the family stronghold. I got cousins around here with like sections of farms and ranches and shit. But I didn't. So when we moved back, I started helping them on the farms and stuff, just kind of see what the hell's going on. I had no idea how much diesel they burn. I mean, they're driving around a support truck with 250 gallons on it to fill the tractors up in the field. Those giant tractors are not fuel efficient.
Yeah. They get about 3 gallons to the mile.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they are burning it up to get the food out of the ground. And there is nobody besides the Amish and the Mennonites that can do it with horses. Nobody else even knows how. Nobody else, even if they had the shit, knows how to do it. As well as one of the other scary factors about that with fuel is, like, I thought I had a grasp on this when I wrote Prairie Fire, especially about how much the manpower difference is. I was wrong. It's basically been, what's the inverse of exponentially falling the number of men that are required to run a field every 10 years since like 1960. What I mean by that is, like, my cousin's combine now will do the same job as 3 combines 10 years ago. And the combine 10 years ago would do the job of 3 to 4 10 years before that. So we're steadily coming down the number of people that it takes to do this. But that does require machinery.
And that original combine 4 generations ago probably replaced 100 field workers.
Exactly. Yeah. Dudes with horses and shit. I mean, as late as like the 1960s, they were still actually unloading grain with a shovel out of the truck.
Yeah.
As soon as we mechanized like augers and all this other bullshit to do that, it started really taking away the manpower from that. It's also not just diesel. All this new shit requires like chips, like more complex chips that are in your car. They got like little grain carts and shit that follow them around. They can offload the combines into. Well, guess what? That's GPS guided. If you need parts for it comes from fucking Taiwan, just like everybody else. There was actually such a change in industry when they couldn't get parts, both this year and last year, that local machine shops started making parts they would have otherwise never touched, because all of a sudden it was economically worth it because you couldn't get like a transmission bearing out of wherever the hell they make that in China. So fuel, huge problem. Now that's going to be less of a problem for me than it is for somebody in, say, Vermont, because there's a refinery like 30 miles north of me, and there's a town of like 20,000 people there, and we make an ass load of gas and diesel. So water for you, for me, it's not diesel, it's not water. It's probably more, anything that comes from a port, because I'm like landlocked in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
So it really just does depend on region. If I was in the Northeast right now, I'd be really looking for a wood stove and a trailer load of wood, because diesel and heating oil are actually made out of the same like distillates in the refining process. So you can pretty much make one or the other in quantity. So heating oil is probably going to be very scarce. So it just kind of depends on where you live. What's the most important thing to you?
So I'm going to assume, although I read the whole book, Prairie on Fire, which I also loved, I'm going to assume most people watching this either don't have the means or don't have the geographical ability to be like a mutual friend of ours who's like, fuck it, I'm going to buy a 30-acre plot of land. I'm going to put a 2,000-gallon diesel tank on it. I'm going to have dogs and goats and fish and all the crazy shit. So let's assume you're not that guy. If you are, God bless you. We'll do another episode for that.
Cool.
Let's say you're your average Los Angelino, Las Vegas resident. You live in tract housing, right? You're in suburbia, hell, or heaven, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
Where do these people start to plan, right? Because, I have some very, very, very progressive friends who, when, I don't know, the Starbucks across the street from their house was being burned to the ground in Santa Monica, or the protesters were starting to shut down the freeway that was 8 blocks behind their house, all of a sudden they were calling, asking me if they could borrow a gun. And I'm like, well, first of all, no, because the state of California has made this a felony, like 8 different felonies if I lend you a gun. And number two, you don't know how to use it, so you'll shoot your friend or you'll shoot your foot or you shoot your daughter in the head on accident because you've never handled a firearm, especially under a stressful situation. So no, come to my house if you want, and we can ride this out together. Only one person took me up on that offer because literally he lived in a condo project in Santa Monica where across the street they were looting the Nike store, they were burning down the Starbucks, and he's watching it from his third floor, and he's like, dude, these are $1 million condos. If any of these people wise up, they're going to turn around and be like, oh, you know who has cool shit to steal? Rich people that live in $1 million condos. So he did come stay at my house for a couple nights. But if you're in that suburban lifestyle, because that's 80% of America, where do you start being, you know, a survivalist or being prepared? Not that you have to become this crazy prepper. I'm never going to have a biosuit level 4 in my garage, but like, you just want to be like, hey, if the
detectors and
if the shit hits the fan, if the shit hits the fan and I got to kind of hunker down with my family, what do I really need?
Okay. Well, I feel like I actually have a unique perspective on this. This is actually the point of view that both of those books were written from, especially Prairie Fire. So here's how 2020 went for me. I lost my house in a house fire in January.
What?
Everything, all of our shit. I lost the use of this arm a week later from blood clots all down this arm into both lungs, almost into my heart. And then
you're really lucky to be alive. Is that why you're all bloated? Because you're like on steroids and shit now?
Well, I'm off of it now, but it was this whole fucking debacle, dude. Yeah, I did almost die. Like I'm a dumbass, so I was like, oh, my arm's a little swollen. Like I'll let it ride a couple days. Went in the hospital. Like 20 minutes later, they're like, stop moving. We're gonna like Jamie. Yeah, it's super bad. So lost all of our shit. I'm in the hospital. Fucking COVID lockdown. So I had to basically, with only one arm, at a rental house, get us ready for COVID. Because I still saw it coming, you know, like probably before most people did. So I was already thinking like budgetary, like we have very limited resources now. And I gotta get the kids like some fucking Legos too, and this terrible shit is coming, so we got to be like ready, like food wise. So that was all kind of baked into, especially Prairie Fire, because I wrote that one fully after the Summer of Love. So you don't have to be rich to get ready, man. Also, same thing on my website, claymartindefense.com. One of the first things that we've done on there is we have like a step-by-step checklist of like all the shit you need for self-defense. Well, there's like a Gucci tier one that like, you got money, dude, this is the one you want, is cool. All right, if you have money but you don't want to spend a lot of it on like some bullshit that hopefully we never need, well, here's like a mid-tier one. And there's also a low-tier one that's something that's actually good enough that like I believe in it. Sometimes that's not super cheap because I believe in using equipment like your life depends on it, but you can get by with not very much, man. I mean, you can buy a $400 Turkish pistol these days that is actually fantastic. I mean, it's awesome. It'll last you forever. It's a good piece of equipment. Anyway, so that was like the idea behind all this. The other big thing for people that live in like, especially like suburbia and stuff like that is getting like your tribe together, kind of like building your gang. That is the overwhelming theme of both books that the prepper movement missed for a lot of years. Like all of your shit doesn't actually matter. Like your pile of stuff and your cool, camouflage sweatpants, all that bullshit. You need some help, some friends, some expertise, somebody to watch your back while you sleep and vice versa. Hopefully somebody that's pulled a tooth one time so you're not having to learn this shit off of a book. You need like a brain trust of people that you can trust that live close to you, and you need to plan for that ahead of time.
Yeah, because like I can have all the tacked out gear and I can play the role and maybe even have some skills, but eventually I have to take a nap. And my wife, God bless her soul, she's worthless in the apocalypse. She frequently messes up her left from her right when she's driving. She has contacts and glasses that are like so thick. Once we lose those, she's done. I'm throwing her to the zombies and saving the kids. And she's terrified of guns. So it's like, who's gonna watch my back when I have to sleep if like things are kind of going a little crazy?
Yeah, dude, that's exactly what I do a lot of times at like survival course or something like that. Like I'll read off my entire resume, which I mean it sounds like a fucking demon's resume. It's like this long of Commando Steve shit. I'm like, I can't do this alone, so I fucking guarantee you can't.
Right.
And that's exactly it, man. I got to take a nap, as well as like there's shit I don't know how to do, as well as like you can throw enough like idiots with AK-47s at me that I'll be overwhelmed. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
Like, you need some pals.
Dude, enough idiots with shovels will overwhelm the military. Look at North Korea, South Korea. Like,
right. Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's 100% right. Like, there's only so much one man can do.
Right. So let's say you just recently bought a house in Vegas. Not that I'm talking about anybody specifically, but theoretically, you just bought a house in Vegas. You know, you kind of wave to your neighbors. You know your name. You know their names. The guy across the street is this old dude who I think used to be in the mafia. I think he's in like witness protection. He'll only tell me his first name. You know, my neighbor next door, he's a contractor, so a lot of valuable skills. You know, if we got to board up some windows or whatnot, he got a lot of supplies in his garage. But just the conversation of going and knocking on the door and being like, hey, excuse me, if we enter a civil war, like who's on my team? Like, how do you have that conversation when you start to think about preparedness or building your tribe or building your community? Because I can't even imagine how to bridge that conversation with the dudes in my neighborhood.
It's tough. It is. And you got to feel it out also, or else you're the weirdo. So the best way into it is, you know, if at all possible, it's best to move somewhere that you're like close to your guys, or everybody make a decision like, we're going to go to this neighborhood of Vegas. That's not always possible. You know, it's real life. That's a difficult thing to do. A lot of people aren't going to uproot and move just for this shit.
Right.
Although we are seeing people like flee towards where they think are the safe states. But, you know, let's say that's out of the question. You just got to feel it out. And this is almost like, this is actually a lot like learning who smokes weed and who doesn't, especially back before it was legal. It's not a problem for you guys anymore, but like, you know, if we go back to 20 years ago when it was illegal everywhere, it might take, you know, a month or two to find out which neighbor smokes weed, and, you know, therefore who's like down, who can I be like, hey man, well, I'm dry this week, or I've got some exit or whatever.
Right.
You kind of have to feel it out the same way. All right, you're looking for those key words. You can kind of feel how a conversation starts and follows. That's pretty much the way you have to approach it.
You know, it's funny because I always bring it up like, hey, I'm going shooting this weekend. And you can see the look in their eye like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to get out to the range. I got a safe full of stuff. Or they're just like, shooting? Why would anybody need to shoot a gun? And it's like, probably not my tribe. And you know what's funny is I go to jiu-jitsu out here, and like some of the toughest dudes who you're like, oh, this guy's probably like ex-special forces, blah, 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 blah. I'll be like, hey man, I'm thinking about going shooting this weekend. Any interest? They're like, a gun, you can shoot those? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And they're like, well, I have been a mechanic at the post office for 22 years. I can't imagine any reason to ever need a gun. I'm like, well, you guys used to shoot up the post office. Like, you had the highest level of homicide. So maybe you should do like concealed carry. But anyway, I digress. I guess that's probably how I've started the conversation with some people. But then like, what do you suspect? Okay, so I find 5 guys in my neighborhood. One's a contractor, you know, one's a retired surgeon. So we've got some good skill sets in the area. Do you have to have like a Monday morning secret tribe meeting where you do like neighborhood watch on steroids, or what's the plan there?
The best way, I think, to like get people moving along the plan, dude, you know what the best thing that ever happened to the prepping movement was?
No
Zombies.
Clue. Who?
Fucking zombies. The zombie craze of like the early 2000s, like, I don't know if you remember how crazy it was, but it was like all the zombie movies and there was like some books. Max Brooks wrote a couple of fucking bestsellers. Anyway, there was like a zombie. Everybody's crazy about zombies.
Yeah, every movie had to have either a zombie or a vampire. It's like we're doing a teenage love story, and it's going to be set in Wisconsin, and do you want to go zombies or do you want to go vampires?
Exactly right. Well, what that did was that provided cover for dudes to like really start prepping, because it was almost like a flex then, like, oh fuck, the zombie apocalypse. People like, well, do you have a pantry full of Mountain House? I have a pantry full of Mountain, but it actually was fantastic. It was covered. It was you could have this weird, stupid hobby that was actually incredibly useful. It was actually the point that Hornady, one of the major American firearms or ammunition manufacturers, they made this shit called zombie defense ammo. They were selling bullets to dudes that didn't own a gun. The packaging looked cool.
Shut the fuck up.
No, fucking series of heart attack. All they did was they took their self-defense round and they turned to the little red plastic green, sold fucking everyone they could make for like 10 years.
Oh my God. By the way, do you endorse Hornady as like your go-to daily carry ammunition? Because that's what's been recommended to me several times for like my concealed carry and stuff.
Pretty much any of your premium American manufacturers are good. Hornady, Federal. I like this stuff called G9 they make in North Idaho. It's fantastic. Norma. pretty much all your defensive ammo is like, man, it's all fucking pretty much the same shit these
Cool.
days. The reason I actually normally, or a lot of times, go with Federal HST is because that's the same one they sell to Homeland Security. So that's really good cover if, like, I have to shoot somebody and it goes to court. What was your man-killing bullet? Well, it's the same one Homeland Security uses.
Federal HST.
Federal HST.
There we go.
And exclusively for that reason. I don't even give a shit if it's the best one. Where was I going, though? Anyway, with getting dudes down the path. Okay, so the zombie shit's over. We can't really do that anymore. But I feel like it's best to, like, kind of have this conversation over, like, you know, beers and the barbecue and that kind of thing. And the less you formalize it, the easier it is to start kind of feeling other dudes out and getting them walking down that path. And then next thing you know, everybody's got, you know, a basement full of, machine guns and ammo and, you know, rice and beans. They're like, oh, shit, here we are. Okay, now we can talk.
All right, there we go. All right, I'm going to start like a gun shooting club where we go like once a month to go shooting and just kind of start identifying my tribe.
That's a great way to do it.
And talk a little bit what you've seen of, like, what is the application for this, right? So it's like, okay, you've got the stuff, you've got like your community. Oh, by the way, we talked about finding your community, number one, but obviously we do need some supplies. Guns, water, medical, like where do you start there?
Man, okay. You got to have a gun because you can't fucking defend your raviolis with your hands.
Right.
So you got to have a gun. But the thing that I see people, I think, do wrong the most, and this is weird coming from a gun guy, because that's what I do. That's also primarily what I teach, all this other shit. People get too many guns. People, like, look at the gun, they're like, that's the fucking answer. I need, like, 15 guns and, like, all this shit. And it's not, man. You need, like, a gun or two. You know, you don't need that many. You certainly don't need more than 5. And you need some bullets. You don't need, like, 1,000,000 or 100,000 rounds of ammunition. You need, like, 1,000. That's a lot. Actually.
By the way, were you on that thread where the dude was like, hey, I've got the download on 1,000,000 rounds of ammunition? Were you on that Signal thread where the guy was like,
was actually me.
Oh my God. When you're like, I got the in on 1,000,000 rounds. I'm like, is it, I feel like this is a setup for me to go to jail. Who needs 1,000,000 rounds?
It's fucking insane. Those are the quantities that you have to buy it anymore to get a price break. So literally you need like a bunch of friends. It's crazy. Yeah, 5 years ago, you could buy pallets like 20,000, which is easily split between 20 dudes. Everything's cool. Now, unless you're buying like north of like 100 and sometimes north of 1,000,000, like the distributors won't even talk to you. They're like, we don't have time for your bullshit, man.
Right.
Like, we'll sell this at retail. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I got to introduce you to my friend Laura Di Benedetto. She's down in Florida. Her and her husband were she's a lifelong entrepreneur, exited a company, retired very young. Her and her husband moved to Hawaii to like live out their retirement years. I think they're in their 30s, maybe early 40s. They were so disgusted by the response to COVID and how like the lockdowns on Hawaii were basically going against everybody's civil liberties. They moved to Florida, decided to rebuild a company, and they now own a company called Sovereign Ammo. They're making American sourced ammo. They're awesome. And I only bring this up because when you mentioned the $1,000,000 rounds, they're having the same problem where they're looking to bring on some investors because they're like, we've got this awesome company that's like now a lifestyle business, but to get a break on the primers and the casings, we have to order 1,000,000 of them, which is $400,000. We don't have $400,000 to dump into the company right now. So they're looking for liaisons and investors and kind of like spokesmen. So you and I might have to talk about that business opportunity after we're done filming this podcast. Perfect. But shout out to Sovereign Ammo. If you like high quality ammo and you don't want your gun to be disgusting after shooting 10 rounds, order their shit. They don't do self-defense rounds, but for the range, I've probably put a couple thousand rounds of their 5.56 ammo through my ARs, and they're phenomenal. Like, burns super clean. I'm a big fan. So anyway, so we got to buy 1,000,000 rounds to get a discount. When I saw that post, I was like, Jesus Christ, is this guy work for ATF or what? I thought you were trying to set us up.
No. It's also funny because like, if you're in like the business of this stuff, that's like no big deal. To tell you one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've ever had. So back in 2013, when you couldn't get gunpowder, me and some of my associates went over to the Czech Republic, where they have a huge state-run gunpowder factory, and they also make like Simtex and all kinds of crazy shit. They have a fucking artillery test range on the premises where they shoot it into, because they build ammo that big. Anyway, what we needed was gunpowder. So we broker this deal, and next thing you know, we bought like a fucking container ship full of gunpowder, and we come back, but we fly through JFK on the way home, And
Oh my
you get
God.
to customs, and they ask you the question. They're like, business or pleasure? Like business. And because, you're not going to lie to the dude, especially
Right.
not in this world. It's like 2014. I check the passport, and they're like, okay, what business are you in? I'm like, importing explosives. And they're like, but again, you can't fucking lie to them.
Right. They know where you were.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So they're like, and they just start, we're covered in shit that they've never, Russian era shit they've never heard of.
Yeah, if they do that little phosphate test or whatever it is where they swipe your phone, that thing's going to fucking blow up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're like, and so they start busting out the license and shit. Like, we are legit. This is what we fucking do. But yeah, they freaked out. Like they were not having that shit. But anyway, yeah, where were we at?
We were at, you need a couple guns.
Yeah, you need a couple guns. All right. For you guys in Vegas, you need a shitload of water. You need probably like 4 55-gallon drums in the garage, like minimum. You gotta have water, man, because you guys are fucking hurting on that shit.
What's the rule? Is it like a gallon a day per person to kind of live and wash and brush your teeth off of, or?
That's to drink.
To drink.
Think about Las Vegas with no air conditioning.
Oh, dude.
A gallon of water. Yeah, brutal. It's more like 2 gallons a day if you're talking about like hygiene, washing, brushing your teeth, all that shit. So it's a lot, man. It goes quick. It goes really quick. Then some food, obviously. And after that, it's really got to be, do I think that whatever problem happens, I will be able to bunker in the house? Or do I think that it's going to be so bad that I need to have an exit strategy? And that kind of dictates your next move. If you're gonna bunker where you're at in Vegas, you need some plywood to cover the. You could have like a little storage locker, one of those things, like some plywood to cover the windows so that Molotov cocktail can't come through them. A DeWalt kit to screw the shit to the doors. If you're gonna leave like a car capable of doing so, a couple of routes out of the city, that's where it kind of starts to diverge.
So, what's crazy is that somebody listening to this who just heard you say, yeah, you might need some plywood for your front window so that a Molotov cocktail doesn't go through your window. I think a lot of people, we have such short fucking memories in America. People are like rolling their eyes. What are these two crazies talking about? Blah, 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 blah. But I just want to remind people that less than 2 years ago, one of my mortgage coaching clients, Vanessa, texted me and was like, hey man, I might make it out to Vegas to live with some family for a while. I heard you guys are pretty good. What's the situation on the ground there? I'm like, what do you mean situation on the ground? I'm like, there was like one kind of minor riot. They cannot have people losing faith in their safety to come to Vegas to gamble. So the sheriffs and the SWAT team shut that shit down fast. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. She's like, well, I'm like 3 blocks away from this thing that went down the other night where this kid killed like 3 dudes. There was the Rittenhouse case. And right now on the entrance to our suburban heaven, $700,000 track houses in Minneapolis, there is a SWAT tank at the front gate of our HOA. And I'm like, you're full of shit. She sent me a picture of it. And there you go. That's a SWAT team tank at the front of their HOA because they were about 3 blocks away from where all these car dealerships and stuff were getting burnt down. And that was just some lady who does loans for a living, has 3 kids, dresses up for Halloween. This is not like crazy to think that, had that, peaceful protest turn riot, turn the corner at 90 degrees, they're in her neighborhood. I mean, it's some scary shit when you think about it.
Oh, it's terrifying. Yeah. This is one of those things where if you're a dude like me, like maybe I thought I was too crazy going into 2020. And then after like 2021, I'm like, I wasn't paranoid enough, man. I was nowhere near the level of nut bar that I needed to be, as I was still shocked myself.
Oh, man. We forgot one major thing. When you buy the gun, please, Americans, because like 30 million people bought their first gun ever in the last 2 years. Can you please go get some NRA training? Go to the range, something. Like I know so many people that bought guns over the last 2 years that are sitting in a little lockbox under their bed. And I'm like, God forbid you ever have to do something with that gun. You're going to kill the wrong person.
Dude, I blame Hollywood for this shit. Like, it's not easy to, the base, like, if you've never fucked with one, never touched one, to be able to, like, semi-competently shoot, like, a target the size of your front door from, like, 5 feet is difficult. The thing people should understand with this is that look at, especially, like, New York City police, where people largely grow up not touching a gun, then they get to the academy and shoot, like, 100 rounds or some shit, and then they're out on the street. Look at the number of times that the NYPD misses or hits a bystander. It's stunning. It's like 90% of the time from whatever range that gunfight breaks out at. And you can look at other. I'm not shit talking cops either. Like they have a tough job, and it's a rough business. But look at the other numbers on police shootings. For every one of like the hero, like, oh my God, this guy did some amazing stuff, like, pulled his rifle up this way and shot somebody at 100 yards. There's some kind of pistol fight where shit went terribly wrong. So look at those numbers and think about the fact that guy carries that for a living. He actually has training, and really, really think about that. Just get some training.
Yeah, it's sad and also eye-opening when you see these things where it's like, oh, there was a police shootout and 150 rounds were exchanged, and this car that some dude was in just got shot to Swiss cheese, and then the post note is, and the victim was shot twice. It's like, wait, whoa, there was 150 rounds exchanged and 2 of them hit the target. That's pretty bad odds, man. Like they don't make magazines that long.
Right. No, it's crazy. Yeah, no, it's actually nuts.
So if somebody's just starting out, like they're just starting to think, all right, maybe I need a firearm. Like what are some basic, obviously there's the 4 basic handling laws of a firearm, whatever, rules of a firearm. But where do you say, like, do they go to the NRA? Do they go to their local range? Do they got to pay a guy like you thousands of bucks to get, competent on their rifle? Like where should people start?
No. Man, your local gun shop usually has a pretty decent beginner's class. All right. And I'll say this is like a high level trainer that's trained like competition professionals, other shit. I would rather have you that's been trained by some FUD nerd that taught you like how to pull a trigger all wrong, those other shit, as long as you know how to handle the gun and you're safe, than I would usually honestly teaching you from nothing. So just get it wherever you can get the basic shit wherever you can. All right, even if it's wrong, we can fix that later. Or if you decide you want to walk the path of like, I shoot all the time, cool, man. We'll get some professional help later. Just learning how to use the fucking thing, you can do it at a local gun shop. NRA's fine for that. One of the best things people can do, and people look at me like I'm smoking crack when I say this, if you're brand new to guns, go buy an airsoft replica of your gun, the one just like it. You got a Glock, we get an airsoft Glock. Put the real gun like in the fucking closet for a week, locked up, and take that airsoft gun and treat every bullet that comes out of it like it's real. All right, and learn how to use it, learn how to load it. Because all the little magazines and shit, they all fall free the same way. They're the same weight most of the time. Learn how to load and unload that gun. Do that shit 100 times without shooting yourself in the hand. The consequences of you hitting yourself at point blank with the airsoft guns, it hurts, especially these ones that have like CO2 gas. It hurts a lot, but you don't die. All right, you don't have to go to the hospital.
Right.
And you can also use that again, making very sure you never mix them up, to do like some very basic stuff like in your garage, and that will actually serve you for a long time. Dude, my range is like 8 minutes away from me, and it's actually not even a range. It's like a farmer's field that I leave my steel in, and I can do whatever the hell I want. I can spin around in circles with a machine gun if I feel like it. I still train airsoft in my backyard because sometimes I don't have the 8 minutes to drive out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes all I can do.
And ammo's expensive. Ammo's like $1 a round now.
Oh yeah. No, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So get that thing too, and you can learn a lot just from that.
I was shocked. I have like my concealed carry is the P365. Like I've kind of fallen in love with the whole SIG family.
Yeah.
And I got the real, like this was just some John Wick shit. I was at the gun store and I got the P320 with all the cool fucking, I don't know if it's anodized steel or whatever. It's just all cool looking, right? Yeah. And then I did exactly what you said because I read your book. I drove to the airsoft store and I'm like, hey, I want an exact replica of the P320. And they're like, yeah, here you go, $200. And it's great. It has a similar weight. Even the functionality of everything, like the trigger and everything, it's exactly the same lower receiver as the gun. It just doesn't have a steel barrel, obviously. Great for training, man. Great when my kids are old enough to learn how to shoot. And my deal with my son is when you can read the 4 basic gun laws and explain them to me, then I'll take you shooting. So it's motivation to read, and I figure that will like kind of hit his maturity level. But they're gonna start with an airsoft, like just treat it like a real gun. Show me what you do, how to unload and load. It's really powerful. And I have found at most of the ranges here, you can probably find some old timer who was a firearm instructor in the Marines or a SWAT guy, and for $100 an hour, they're just tickled pink to teach like a new guy how to use a firearm.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. And like I said, man, even if that dude's not like, Wyatt Earp or he couldn't hang, he knows what he's doing. All right. He knows the competency level. and he can at least get you good enough to, like, you know, defend yourself in a shorter. Yeah, that's a great way to do business.
So I got to tell you a funny story, which kind of, some people think concealed carry is crazy. You know, I grew up in the communist state of California, where until recently you couldn't get a concealed carry. I went, I had like a coaching call. So I went to have breakfast. I had a coaching call. I'm driving back and I pass my wife and kids in the car. She's going to take them to school. Right as I round the corner, there's this schizophrenic, drugged out of his mind. He's in boxers and a tool belt and a tore up shirt. It looks like he hasn't showered in months. And he's in one of our neighbors' front yards with a screwdriver attacking the Halloween decorations. Because the guy had like a life-size Frankenstein and a life-size Dracula. So I park across the street. I call 911. And as I'm on the phone with 911 telling them, hey, you know, there's this, they're like, oh, well, you know, we don't have a unit close by. We'll send one en route. As the guy is stabbing the Halloween decorations, he decides he's going to go for the front door. I happen to know the family that lives there, and we live in a really nice suburb, right?
Right.
I know the guy that lives there. I know he works early, and his wife and kids probably home because I see their car parked. And this guy's starting to try to pry open the metal door. So I'm on the phone with 911, and I'm like, hey, dispatch, this guy's now trying to break into the house with a screwdriver. Like, I have a firearm. I'm going to shoot the guy if he gets into the house, you know, or I'm gonna follow him and try to de-escalate the situation. But it's totally clear the guy's having a break with reality. Right. And they're like, sir, use your best judgment. We recommend you don't get out of the car. You know, they're saying all the disclosure stuff. Oh, right. So luckily the guy kind of realizes he can't pry open the metal door. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, dude, my wife and kids were just loading into the car 2 blocks away. Like, God forbid he had walked up on them. Who the fuck knows what happens? And he finally like loses interest. He starts walking. He meanders into a park. I kind of follow him in the truck at a safe distance. He parks up inside of a public park bathroom. Now I can hear him beating the urinal, like saying "fuck you," and like I can just hear him smashing his hands into the urinal. It took 37 minutes. I was on the phone with 911 the whole time and apprising them of the situation. And I'm like, hey, this is what I'm wearing when the cops show up. Please don't have them shoot me. I do have a concealed firearm. 37 minutes for them to respond. And we live in one of those neighborhoods that's frequently rated like top 10 safest neighborhoods in America. Wow. And I was like, if this didn't confirm my opinion of like people should be willing and ready to protect their own homestead, like, you know, there's a lot of crazy. So I ended up talking for about half an hour with the cops, and they're like, hey, man, we're really sorry, but we can't really do anything. Like, he didn't lunge at you with the screwdriver. He didn't actually make entry into the house, so he didn't technically break a law. There's no law that's saying you can't scratch up somebody's stucco with a screwdriver. And sadly, in all of Nevada, there's no place to put these crazies, so we'll kind of usher them along and push them out to the business district because this is where, you know, we usually don't get calls in this area. But, you know, next time if it happens, if he lunges at you, just shoot him. And I was like, so what, it's my job now to be the police and the vigilante? I'm like, this is some crazy shit. But I was also encouraged by the fact that, like, hey, I was at least there and could have protected that family if the dude got in the house with a screwdriver, because who the fuck knows what he would have done?
There is no worse feeling in the world than being in a situation where you need a gun and you don't have it.
Right.
You know, yeah. No, and this is the world that we live in now. You're exactly right. And it's, you know, also with let's like defund the police and shit, and just the things that have happened over the last 3-4 years. A lot of good dudes have quit and just been like, this isn't worth it. And I get it. But because of that, man, dude, police forces everywhere are hurting.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bad hurting. And that's an institution that we probably couldn't recover for another 10, 15 years. You know, if we decided right now, like today, like we love cops and we're going to fund the shit out of them and everybody's going to give them hugs and shit, it would take a really long time to correct that damage. So yeah, man, people got to be prepared. Like you are your own cops now. 37 minutes, man. That's a long time for a guy with a weapon.
Yeah.
A screwdriver is a fucking weapon.
Yeah, it's not like I was saying like, oh, the neighbors are playing their music too loud. All right, dude, show up whenever you want to show up. If my neighbor's got mariachi bands in the backyard, whatever. That's not going to, but yeah, somebody with a weapon trying to actively break into a house where I'm telling you there's a wife and kids there. it was crazy to me. And like, I don't begrudge the cops, they've got 2 units per 10 square miles or whatever the hell they got, and they're responding to something else. That's a tough gig, man. So
that's brutal.
What else am I missing? What else did I forget to ask about that base level of preparedness?
Okay, man, we got guns, we got water, we got food, training. Oh man, this is probably a huge one. You've got this covered, and a lot of people don't. Okay, look, a lot of people get the gun, right, and they think like the gun is the end all be all. Like I got the shit now. You also need to learn how to fight, and it's not just so that you learn how to fight. All right, it's because like being able to deal with interpersonal violence is such a huge asset. That's it. Realistically, that's where we're at. Okay, look, we're not going to just like load up machine guns one day and like the other team's going to put on uniforms and we're just going to shoot each other. Like that's probably not going to happen. Probably it's going to be more like just a continued escalation of crime. That's just going to get worse. Economy turns to shit. People get desperate. Now we have more criminals. Let's get shit. So I really feel like learning how to fight with your hands at a very basic level, like, jujitsu with like 1 stripe on your white belt, going to kick boxing or Western boxing for like, 6 months. So you've been hit in the face and you know that you can walk that shit off and it's fine. It hurts, but you're okay.
Yeah.
That to me is a huge, huge deal. I feel like you just got to have that. And with that too, the one thing that hand-to-hand combat guys get wrong, all right, you got to have some knife training because this is the easiest weapon in the world for everybody to have. They're very common in street crime, street fights. The crazy guy with the fucking screwdriver, man, he does not care if it's an advantage for him to have a hidden shiv. And a lot of crazies are like that because, hobo fights, so they have Glocks, they have hidden razor blades and shit. So getting an appreciation for knife from some knife dude, you can do that one you can do that in like a weekend seminar if it's the right guy and get a lot out of it. But I feel like that's hugely important. And it's probably the most underrated of all the skills that people have.
Yeah, my thought process goes, pay attention to the surroundings so you don't get yourself into a bad situation. De-escalate. Run. Run from a knife, charge a gun, and then if shit goes really bad, hopefully you have a knife or a gun. So it's like, I just think, I'm picking on my wife, and she's a wonderful person, but she just has no like spatial awareness, right? Like we've been walking by people before, and I'll kind of like just subtly shuffle her to the outside of the path as we pass by somebody, and she'll be like, "Oh, why'd you do that?" I'm like, "Well, because that was a homeless crazy guy talking to himself, and he had a razor blade in his hand. And so if he's gonna go crazy, like we want to try to cross the street, get away, and at a bare minimum, I want to put me between you and him, So just like that spatial situational awareness, and then it's real easy, like if you don't let your ego get in the way or you don't have road rage, it's real easy to run away from 90% of problems. And then hopefully it never escalates, but if it does, then you go, hand-to-hand, knife, gun, and that's a terrifying thought, even for somebody like me who has done jiu-jitsu and boxing for jiu-jitsu for 3 years, boxing for 10 years. I've shot a lot of guns. It's like, it's a terrifying thought that I hope I never have to get into that situation.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. And I think the fear of it actually paralyzes a lot of people. And I don't think it's true you're training all the right things, but a lot of people are actually, even if they don't consciously acknowledge it, are so scared of those types of things, like the fighting thing, that they'll do one or two things. They'll either get the gun and just think that's it. It's the end all be all. And they will just refuse to acknowledge the other situations exist. Or they'll know that the other situations exist, but they still won't go train in those things specifically, even like a weekend, like force on force course, like Tony Blau or somebody like that. They still are so scared of the hitting each other part that they won't go do it, man. And that's probably the biggest one to get over. Because if you can get over like getting in a fist fight or even a pretend fist fight, like all the other shit's easy. Gun shit, that's easy. All right, it's a tool, man. It's fucking standoff distance. Like, and it doesn't hurt my hand when I pull the trigger. Turns out,
right,
easier. So I really do feel like there's something to those like primal things of the other bit, And like I said, man, you don't have to be like a fucking UFC star or any of this bullshit. You just need to train at a level that you're, semi-competent. go to somebody's force on force course for like even like a weekend thing, and then get good with a gun, because at least you've got a base then.
It's so funny because I see some of these guys at the range that I go to. This was much more prevalent in LA when I go shooting there, mostly indoor ranges, kind of boutique. You know, they've got vending machines and it's all pretty and whatnot. And these dudes will show up in tactical gear and all these fucking, like, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they're morbidly obese. And I'm like, bro, do 20 burpees and then try to draw your firearm, rack it, and shoot a target without blowing your foot off. When you get your heart rate up, like, that's the thing I'm most happy about jiu-jitsu. It's helped me in my marriage with my kids. It's helped me just dealing with the stress of work. When you can have a 300-pound guy laying on you and you have to breathe and have to, like, not freak out and get claustrophobia, that helps a lot. Because I see some of these guys that think they're Rambo with their, you know, like you said, owning 50 guns and all the tactical gear. And I'm like, if I made you do 10 burpees right now, you would lose your goddamn mind. Like, you wouldn't know which way is up. So physical fitness may be part of it as well.
Oh, dude, yeah. These are SEAL Team 6's boots. Well, like, have they gone a mile yet? Like, that fucking matters more.
But I got the boots. Clay. I've just never walked in them.
I'm fucking straight, dog. I'm ready to go.
Oh, man. So I want to hear a little bit. What do you now offer? Like, how do you make your living with, you know, the tactical training, and, like, what's the suite of kind of products that you offer?
So I do a couple things that make it for me. So number one is, like, we have had a lot of people that, like, want, like, all the shit. Like, they just woke up one day and realized, like, oh my God, the world's fucking crazy, and I need to be outfitted soup to nuts. And I will do that. Now, that's a very small client base that actually is going to show up and be like, I know that's a big number you just quoted me, but here's some extra. I want everything. I want to go, you know, from my toes to, like, my pantry filled and, you know, 100,000 rounds.
I want my family to know how to cover and move and, like, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Like, I want all the shit. Like, we can do that. The other thing that I do is you know, just very similar. Like, I do over the phone consulting. So, you know, people call me up like, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing, where I want to start. We can get them going on that. I do a lot of what we in the military we call area studies for people. That's basically where, like you came to me, for instance, a client, like, hey, I live here in Vegas. What are my threats? What do I need to know about my area? And that would cover, like, a wide variety of, you know, not quite apocalypse scenarios, but, like, okay, you know, if this kind of shit happens, this is the problem for you. If this kind of shit happens, this is the problem for you. All the way down to, like, a personal security assessment, like, of your house. Like, here's the entry points as a covert entry specialist. Like, here's where I would come in, here's what I would do, here's how we can harden that up, here's how we can make that problem go away.
So are you talking about stuff like you'd walk my property and be like, oh, cool, we got ring cameras here, maybe you need 2 dogs instead of 1 dog, you need, you know, this kind of fence, this, you know, this type of lighting, that type of stuff?
Yeah, this type of bush under these types of windows, all that kind of shit. So we do that, and then a lot of what I do now is training. Like, I actually do training. I usually don't do, like, open enrollment courses. Normally I do more like, you know, you got, like, 10 friends that, like, you vetted, they're, like, your boys. Call me up, tell me what you want. And I come out and I give personalized training for that, because that also allows me to kind of stay away from, like, the super, I can still do the super beginner stuff for your super beginner group, but it also allows me to, like, really tailor something to what you need. Yeah. Normally that includes, like, an hour phone conversation first. Like, okay, man, what's your experience level? What do you want to know how to do? And then we kind of tailor a package to that.
Yeah. It's funny. I have 2 really specific questions. When you're talking about, you know, home defense, have some sharp plants in front of all your windows. Yeah. Make sure you have a metal door, lights, some rings, camera. In things that you've seen either in wartime or peacetime or the civilian life, how valuable are deterrents? Like, criminals are obviously looking for an easy score. Yes. Like just the simple shit. Does that drop your likelihood of being the victim of a crime by 10%, by 99%? If you just do some basic deterrents, how much does that help?
Man, I think about 40, 50%, depending on the level of desperation and the level of crime that you're talking about. But I mean, even there's a lot of, like, legal reasons to not have fake cameras. Right. But even back when we still did, like, fake cameras, that'll cut your crime by a significant portion. Now that gets offset when you talk about places like California, where stealing below $1,000 is no longer a crime.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If we've ever seen the broken window theory like taken to its logical conclusion, surprise, surprise, when you don't make it illegal to steal up to $1,000 worth of shit, people steal a lot of shit. Like,
right. Yeah.
Oh.
I know. It's amazing, right? Yeah. No. So it doesn't count in California anymore, but for the most part, man, those deterrent things, they make a huge difference. And like I said, they make a deterrent different to a certain level. Like I said, if the crime is just like going fucking crazy, all right, well, we're gonna have to escalate those countermeasures too. You also in weird type situations, like if you have the only nice house surrounded by like 300 shitty houses, well, cameras aren't gonna do it.
Yeah, you gotta up the ante there.
You're going to need some like Sicarios with machine guns and shit. I know it's just, it is what it is. But for the most part, just the deterrent factor, huge.
Fascinating. Anything I forgot to ask, man? I mean, I feel like I could talk to hours. I feel like I could talk for hours with you about politics and ex-military stuff. But on the self-defense side, anything other than reading your book, who should read what? Prairie Fire versus Concrete Jungle?
They actually work best together. So here's what they were for. Concrete Jungle was written for urban dwellers, and Prairie Fire was written for like kind of country suburban dwellers. People in like the tract houses should get both because but there's also a lot of things that I put in Concrete Jungle that I didn't put in Prairie Fire and vice versa, just because I wasn't going to repeat myself. I figured that most of my audience has one or the other. Concrete Jungle is a lot bigger on like planning and organizing like your people. Prairie Fire is a little bit more on like planning and organizing like a community. So they kind of work best together.
Love it, man. And obviously the best case scenario is we don't ever have to use any of this shit.
Yeah, none of this shit. Yeah. 10 years from now, you're like, Clay, I can't believe that, I bought, $10,000 worth of shit that I never touched. And, I did all this training that kept me healthy. Like, it's terrible, man.
Frankly, the last 15 years, I probably smoked $10,000 worth of cigars. So having some emergency stash is not that bad of an idea.
It's all worth it. We can laugh about that part later. It's all good.
Perfect, man. 3 questions to close us out. One, what's the easiest place for people to find you?
ClayMartinDefense.com. That's my website. Or you can find me on Twitter. What's my @ now? I've been banned a couple of times. I'm way off the res. I do a lot of Twittering.
Way off the res. REZ or RES?
RES.
RES. Okay. Well, hopefully now with the chief twit being Elon, hopefully you'll never get banned again.
Right. Well, I was actually wondering, like, if my other accounts come back, which guy am I now? Who am I?
That's a little too philosophical for me. We're not talking about who am I on this podcast. That's a different podcast. And then last 2 questions. One, favorite movie, and number 2, what are you most looking forward to? This is gonna release probably the end of 2022. We're actually like a month ahead in our podcast schedule, which has never happened before. So going into 2023, what are you looking forward to, and favorite movie and why? I should ask that question first because I feel like I learn a lot about people about their favorite movie and why, because I'm like such a movie nerd. But those 2 questions. What are you looking forward to, and favorite movie and why?
Man, it's gonna break your heart if you're a super movie nerd. Then I haven't watched a movie now in like 5 years. I'm halfway through The Northman on Amazon because it has been fantastic so far, but I still haven't got to close out the last half of it.
Okay.
So all-time favorite movie? Oh man, that's a tough one. I got so just jaded about fucking Hollywood. You know what? I'm actually going to say John Wick, the first one only.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, dude, why did they end the fucking series there, man? That movie was so good.
It is
so good.
It's maybe the best revenge story. Like, there's no plot. There's no plot. It's just, I'm going to fuck these guys up because he killed my dog.
No, it was awesome. And it was so, like, raw cut and shit, too. Keanu was, like, in his element. Like, he was fucking perfect, man. He was awesome. And he should... The next 2 with, like, the bulletproof suits and shit. Like, come on, man. Like, I just couldn't.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a follow-up question then, because maybe this will be more relevant to what we've been talking about. What are some of the most realistic war movies you've ever seen? I mean, you've been there. You've been shot at in anger. You've shot people to defend your own life, or to take a life. Like, what are the most realistic war movies that you're like, oh man, they really nailed it there. That film gave me a little PTSD.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely Saving Private Ryan.
Oh yeah.
Particularly the beach scene. Yeah. And without even having taken an artillery barrage, but one nowhere as bad as what those guys were taking, I can still like appreciate it. So that was fantastic. We Were Soldiers, about a war in Vietnam.
Great movie. Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
When they're getting surrounded, you just you feel the desperation in all those characters. Right. Highly underrated movie.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. Oh no, it was absolutely awesome. The British movie Bravo 20.
Oh, I've never seen that.
About a lost patrol in the Gulf War.
Bravo 20.
It really did happen that the SAS patrol they were out looking for scuds, got engaged, all this crazy shit happened. Couple guys got killed, couple guys got captured, and one guy actually escaped. But it was like it may have even been the BBC made that movie, but they had some like good consulting help. So it's like a low budget movie, but it's awesome. Nice. I mean, it was like very well done. It was fantastic.
How about Black Hawk Down? Is that sensationalized or is that pretty accurate?
That's pretty good, man. It really is. Because again, they had a lot of help. They had a lot of dudes that were there, kind of consult on the film and stuff. So typically the only thing that you see different on like a movie from like real life is many times you see like the distances compressed because it's the only way you can fit it on screen. Like,
right.
Black Hawk Down, I mean, phenomenal. That's a very well done movie too. In fact, that one's so realistic. I haven't watched it in a long time now because I don't know how that would get me in the feels. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it. Funny story about Saving Private Ryan, although not that funny. I was dating a girl in Kansas when I was in the Army when that movie came out. And a bunch of us went with our girlfriends to see the movie. I broke up with the girl shortly afterwards. That opening scene where he goes and there's just a field of tombstones, and he clearly has a breakdown. I think he even had like his 82nd Airborne pin on his jacket. He breaks down. The girl that I was dating, let's just say she was not lighting the world on fire with her IQ. She turns over to me and she goes, Why is he crying? And I'm like, well, maybe because he saw a lot of people die, and those are all the dead soldiers he served with. And she's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That relationship did not. Luckily, she was beautiful because that relationship did not have a lot of mental horsepower in the conversation.
That was held together with other glue. It was not.
Yeah, glue. That's a good word for it. I'm going to use that one. Right. It was held together with the glue.
I know of which I speak.
Yes, exactly. And then give us a silver lining, man. Going into 2023, what are you looking forward to, or what's a positive exit from this path that we seem to be on to like sustained low level conflict, whether it's Antifa or QAnon or BLM or whoever the next group is, or the January 6th riots, or whoever the next group is that decides to start some shit on fire. What's an off ramp? Like, what's something that you're looking forward to in 2023, or something you're hopeful for?
Dude, we're gonna win. People look, this kind of shit, especially like the Antifa stuff and this shit only worked once. All right, because people were caught off guard. All right, same with like the COVID scam. Like that shit only works once. People were like, okay, maybe this is the Black Plague, and it wasn't. I get it, man, and I get that one especially too because like I was fully bought into the COVID shit. Like when it started, like I was a crazy person. Like I was the dude with like the gloves on, like spraying down my groceries and shit, and like locking the mask and everything. So people, I think, and people are waking up. All right, people are not going to let this shit go down, and I have a lot of faith in like the average American just dude that like doesn't really give a shit about a lot of this, but if you push him hard enough, he's going to be like, no, we're not fucking doing it.
Right.
I think that's actually the overwhelming majority. And I think no matter what, even if it is blood in the streets, or if it's just like one of those things where we're like, we vote our way out of this and everything's cool. In the end, like I feel like the free will, the sovereign man walks away from this and wins. Now, we're going to take a couple of hits to do that, but I just feel like in the end, like it's a foregone conclusion, we win.
I love it, man. That's some positivity on like America. The ideal and the average guy is stronger than all the craziness and the politicians and the politics and all that shit.
Yeah.
Love it, dude. Man. That's the way to end a podcast, man. I really appreciate you being on. And do you ever make it out here to the West Coast, like California or Vegas?
Man. Yeah, actually, I will reroute next time. I drive back to Boise quite a bit, actually.
Oh, cool.
So we go that way.
Well, man, this is not an empty invitation. I feel like we could have a cigar, have a drink here in the studio, and have a great time in person. Put you up in the guest bedroom, and whether it's passing rerouting through Vegas, or if for some reason you ever end up in Los Angeles, let me know, and we'll either get together for an in-person podcast, or we'll just smoke a cigar and talk about all the shit we can't talk about on the podcast without getting blacklisted by the NSA.
Right. Perfect, man. No, that's awesome. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on, man. I had a great time. And, let's do this again sometime. But in person, for sure, that would be fucking awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.